Emily Carter stood by the window of the grand Blackwood estate, gently rubbing her growing belly, watching the autumn leaves swirl in the crisp morning breeze. At 8 months pregnant, she radiated a natural beauty that required no makeup, no effort, only joy. Her cheeks held a permanent blush, her eyes sparkled with hope. She was carrying her first child, and despite the recent coldness from her husband, Nathan, she still felt like the luckiest woman alive. The house was massive, an architectural marvel of glass, stone, and wealth. Everything inside sparkled, from the imported chandeliers to the pristine marble floors. Nathan Blackwood, a self-made millionaire, was known in business circles as ruthless but brilliant. To the outside world, their marriage was a fairy tale. Tabloids adored them, and society praised Emily's grace and Nathan's generosity. They were photographed at charity galas, magazine covers labeled them as Power Couple of the Year, and their love story, from a quiet bookstore meet-cute to a wedding in the French Riviera, was the stuff of envy. But behind the thick glass walls and iron gates of the estate, Emily had begun to notice small cracks forming in her perfect world. It started with Nathan coming home later and later, his explanations vague and always wrapped in business jargon. At first, she believed him. Of course he was busy, building empires didn't come easy. But then came the phone calls he would take in private, retreating to his home office and locking the door. She once stood outside for nearly 10 minutes, hand hovering over the knob, unsure whether to knock or walk away. When he finally emerged, his face was pale, his shirt untucked, and his excuse was awkward: conference call with the Singapore team. Then there were the changes in his demeanor. He no longer kissed her forehead before leaving. He didn't ask about baby names or nursery colors. He hardly touched her growing belly anymore, the same belly he once held with such awe. Their conversations had reduced to short sentences, sometimes silence. And yet, Emily made excuses for him. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe the stress of becoming a father was getting to him. She even wondered if she was being overly emotional. Hormones, after all, were powerful. One evening, while cleaning out a drawer in the study, Emily found a lipstick-stained napkin tucked between some receipts. The brand wasn't hers. The color wasn't hers. A wave of nausea hit her that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. She sat on the velvet chair, staring at it, willing herself not to overreact. It could mean nothing. Maybe it was left from a dinner guest. She didn't confront Nathan. Not then. Not yet. Instead, she tried harder. She planned romantic dinners, decorated the nursery herself, even wore the perfume he used to love. But Nathan's detachment only grew. When she looked into his eyes, she saw someone distant, someone already far away. And yet, Emily held on, because she loved him. Because she believed in the life they built. Because she didn't want to believe that the man she gave everything to could be pulling away when she needed him the most. Daniel Carter had always been the kind of brother who could sense things before they were said. Growing up, he was Emily's protector, the older sibling who wiped her tears, fixed her bike, and glared down any boy who dared make her cry. Even now, as a successful journalist in another state, he made a point to check in with her regularly. So when he arrived unannounced at the Blackwood estate on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the change in his sister's demeanor was immediate and unsettling. Emily greeted him with a forced smile and a too-quick hug, her arms trembling just slightly. Her home looked immaculate, like a magazine spread, but there was a coldness to it that hadn't been there before. Daniel couldn't ignore the hollow look in her eyes, the weariness in her voice. She moved slower, laughed less, and flinched when the front door opened and Nathan's heavy steps echoed into the foyer. Nathan, dressed in a tailored suit and still talking into his Bluetooth headset, barely acknowledged Daniel. "Didn't know we had company," he muttered, his tone clipped. Daniel smiled tightly. "Just in town. Thought I'd check in on my sister." Nathan gave a nod and walked past them into his office, the door clicking shut behind him. Emily looked away. The next few hours were filled with awkward small talk, a quiet dinner, and Nathan staying locked in his study. Emily tried to steer the conversation toward baby clothes and paint colors, but Daniel wasn't fooled. Something was off, deeply off. He noticed how often she glanced at her phone, how her hand rested protectively on her belly like a shield. He decided he wouldn't leave without answers. That night, after Emily went to bed early, Daniel stepped outside for air. He stood on the back terrace, looking out over the estate's manicured lawns, his thoughts heavy. That's when he made a silent promise. If something was wrong, he'd find out what. 200 miles away, in a high-rise luxury hotel overlooking the city skyline, Nathan Blackwood leaned back on a silk-covered pillow while Olivia Hart poured them both glasses of champagne. She wore a red silk robe barely tied at the waist, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of ink. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic, dangerous, and entirely aware of her power. "You're late," she teased, handing him a glass. "Your poor wife must be worried sick." Nathan smirked, taking the glass. "She's always worried these days. I tell her I'm on calls. She's too naive to question it." Olivia sat beside him, legs draped over his. "Naive? Or just blindly loyal?" "Does it matter?" he said, kissing her shoulder. "It's almost over." Olivia narrowed her eyes. "It better be. You promised me everything. The company. The estate. A fresh start, just us." Nathan tensed slightly. "It's complicated. She's pregnant." "She's in the way," Olivia replied coldly. "And we both know you don't want that baby." He didn't respond right away. His silence was answer enough. Their affair wasn't just about lust, it was layered with greed, ambition, and carefully masked resentment. Olivia had been part of Nathan's life years ago, before Emily, before the riches. She knew things about him no one else did. Things he had buried. And now, with Emily vulnerable and distracted, Olivia had returned like a flame to dry grass, reigniting old desires and dark plans. "I have a solution," Olivia whispered, her fingers trailing down his chest. "One that ensures we both get what we want, and no one suspects a thing." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of solution?" She leaned close, her voice barely audible. "The kind that makes her disappear." And in that moment, Nathan didn't object. Thunder cracked across the night sky as rain lashed against the windows of the Blackwood estate. Trees bent in the wind, and the electricity flickered twice before going out completely. Emily stood alone in the nursery, a soft night light casting gentle shadows across the walls. She had just folded a baby blanket when she felt it, that deep, nagging feeling that something was about to happen. Nathan had been quiet all day, barely speaking to her, and when she tried to ask where he was going earlier, he simply said, "Out," and slammed the door. He returned late, soaked and silent, eyes unreadable. She had tried to talk to him, to tell him she was scared, to ask what was going on, but he shut her down with the same coldness that had been growing for weeks. They argued. Not a shouting match, just tense, sharp words in the dark living room. He accused her of being too emotional. She begged him to be honest. But no honesty came. Only silence. Afterward, Nathan went upstairs. Emily sat on the couch for hours, crying softly into her hands, until her eyes closed. The next morning, she was gone. The staff said they hadn't seen or heard anything. Nathan told the police that she had stormed out during the night after their argument, leaving behind only her phone and purse. He painted the picture of a woman overwhelmed by pregnancy, confused and impulsive. "She's been unstable," he said solemnly, shaking his head in front of the officers. "I didn't want to say it, but she hasn't been well mentally. Maybe postpartum anxiety, even before the birth. I'm worried about her." The media ran the story within hours. Millionaire's pregnant wife vanishes after emotional breakdown. Photos of Emily with captions like, "Was she crying for help?" flooded the news cycle. The police did a standard sweep of nearby areas, checked bus stations and hospitals, but it was all surface level. No urgency. No sense of real concern. Daniel Carter got the call from a mutual friend 2 days later. At first, he thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. But when he called Emily's phone and it went straight to voicemail, a knot formed in his chest. He got in his car without packing a bag and drove straight to the Blackwood estate, fury building with every mile. Nathan greeted him at the door with a rehearsed expression of concern. "We've done everything we can," he said. "I've cooperated with police. There were no signs of struggle. She was upset, and I think she just left." Daniel's eyes burned. "She's 8 months pregnant. She wouldn't leave without her phone. Without telling me. Without taking anything." Nathan offered a forced sigh. "We can't always predict what people will do in that state of mind." But Daniel wasn't buying it. He knew his sister. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't unstable. She was strong, even in her most emotional moments. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and he could feel it in his bones. That night, Daniel stayed in a hotel rather than sleep under Nathan's roof. He reviewed everything he could remember from his last visit. Her nervous glances, Nathan's dismissiveness, the way she had held her stomach protectively. The timeline didn't make sense. He pulled up maps, checked Emily's social media accounts, talked to her friends. No one had heard from her. No activity. No pings. Like she had just vanished into smoke. But Daniel refused to accept it. He didn't care how rich or powerful Nathan was. Something inside him, call it instinct, or the unshakable bond of a brother who had always protected his sister, told him that Emily wasn't just missing. She had been taken. 3 months before Emily's disappearance, Nathan Blackwood paced the floor of a luxury penthouse suite, a glass of whiskey trembling in his hand. The city lights below cast reflections on the high-rise windows, but Nathan was blind to the view. Olivia Hart sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, swirling her own drink. Her expression was unreadable. Calm, poised, but behind her eyes burned something dangerous. "I'm pregnant," she said again, this time slower, letting each word sink in like poison. Nathan froze. "That's not possible." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "It's not only possible, Nathan. It's real. I've taken the tests. Seen the doctor. It's yours." He ran a hand through his hair, swearing under his breath. This ruins everything." She stood and walked over to him, placing a hand on his chest. "No, Nathan. It doesn't ruin everything. It changes everything. For the better, if we do this right." His pulse raced. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't even wrapped his mind around being a father to Emily's child, let alone now Olivia's. The timing couldn't be worse. Emily was due in just a couple of months. His reputation, his company, his entire image as the clean-cut, devoted husband, it would all collapse if this came out. And Olivia knew it. "You need to make a choice," she whispered. "I won't hide. I won't let my child be a scandal." He looked away, but she grabbed his chin, forcing him to face her. "She's in the way. You know it. You've known it for months." "I can't divorce her right now," he muttered. "The press, the board members, my lawyers would drag this for years. And if she finds out about you? About the baby?" He shook his head. "She'd destroy me." Olivia's voice turned sharp. "Then don't give her the chance." The idea began as a whisper, a suggestion floating between them in the silence that followed. Divorce was messy, scandalous, but disappearance, that was quiet, temporary. If Emily were simply gone, everything could move forward. The sympathy would be his. The narrative would be his to control. And once the dust settled, he could introduce Olivia as the new light in his life. Over the next few weeks, they planned carefully. Olivia used her old connections from her darker days, a pharmacist who owed her a favor, a discreet supplier of sedatives. Nathan watched with cold fascination as the woman he thought he controlled took the lead in every detail. "We won't kill her," Olivia said firmly. "We'll just remove her. Long enough for the baby to be born, long enough for the world to move on." Nathan nodded. Killing her crossed a line he wasn't willing to step over. But hiding her? Isolating her? That he could stomach. On the night of the storm, Olivia waited in a black SUV parked near the back gate of the estate. Nathan poured Emily tea laced with a strong sedative, pretending to comfort her after their argument. She drank it, still hoping her husband was softening again, unaware of what she had just swallowed. Minutes later, as her body grew heavy and her vision blurred, Nathan helped her to bed. But instead, he carried her limp form down the back staircase and into the car. Olivia drove while Nathan sat beside his unconscious wife, heart pounding, his hand on her wrist, checking to make sure she was still breathing. They drove for hours, deep into the forest where no cell signal reached. Olivia had found an old hiking cave, abandoned and barely marked on any map. Together, they dragged Emily inside, chaining her to a rock bolt left by previous explorers. A thin blanket. A bottle of water. Enough to keep her alive. Then they left her there. In the silence of the woods, Nathan didn't say a word. He simply lit a cigarette with shaking hands and watched as Olivia erased their tracks behind them. Emily stirred slowly, the damp chill of the stone floor seeping into her skin before her eyes could even open. Her head pounded. Her limbs were heavy, sluggish. She tried to sit up but felt something tug sharply at her wrist. Panic surged through her. When her eyes finally focused, she saw nothing but darkness, thick, suffocating, pitch black. She blinked, hoping it would clear. But there was no light. Only the overwhelming scent of wet earth, mildew, and something metallic. Rust, maybe. Her fingers found the cold iron cuff wrapped around her right wrist, secured by a short chain bolted into the rock wall. Confusion melted into horror. She called out at first, "Nathan!" Her voice echoing back at her, bouncing off unseen walls. Then again, louder. But only her own voice answered. "Nathan! Where are you?" Silence. Tears sprang to her eyes. Her mind was cloudy, pieces of the night before coming in fragments. Tea. She remembered the tea. The warm cup he handed her. The softness in his voice, so unlike the coldness she had grown used to. She remembered feeling drowsy. Her limbs going heavy. His arms lifting her. And then, nothing. She screamed. Not words, just pure, animal fear. The kind that claws at your throat and tightens your chest. Her cries echoed through the dark cave, and still, no one came. Hours passed. Maybe longer. Time blurred in the dark. Her belly, round and heavy with life, felt tighter than usual. The baby kicked. She sobbed with relief and fear all at once. At least she wasn't alone. At least the baby was still alive. A thin, flickering light appeared days later. Or was it hours? She couldn't tell anymore. Nathan stepped into the mouth of the cave holding a flashlight, his figure casting a long shadow. For a moment, she felt hope. Surely, he'd come to get her out. Surely, this was all a mistake. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Why am I here? What is this?" He didn't come close. He stood just far enough that the light barely reached her. His expression was unreadable. "I had no choice, Emily," he said flatly. "You were making things difficult." Her voice cracked. "I'm pregnant with your child. How could you?" "It's temporary," he said coldly. "Just until things settle. I'll come back. Just stay calm. Don't fight it." "You chained me, Nathan," she cried. "This is a cave. I don't even know where I am." "You're safe," he replied. "As long as you stay quiet." Then he turned and left, the beam of the flashlight shrinking into nothing until she was swallowed by darkness again. Days passed. Then weeks. The single bottle of water ran out quickly. The stale crackers he left were gone in 2 days. Hunger gnawed at her. Her body ached. She talked to the baby out loud, trying to stay sane. She counted her breaths, sang lullabies, anything to keep her mind from unraveling. She screamed until her voice disappeared. Cried until her eyes were dry. Her belly grew heavier. Her back screamed with pain. She didn't know how many days had passed. No one came. Not Nathan. Not anyone. What terrified her most wasn't the hunger or the dark, it was the possibility that Nathan would never return. That this wasn't temporary. That she'd been buried alive. And the baby inside her, innocent and unaware, was trapped with her. High in the hills above the tree line, in a crooked little cabin nestled beneath towering pines, Mrs. Langford lived alone. She'd been a recluse for over 20 years, her only companions the woods, a worn radio, and a mutt named Winston. Most of the town thought she was a little strange. Harmless but odd. People left her alone, and she preferred it that way. She was used to the howls of foxes and the rustling of deer in the underbrush. But lately, something had changed. For 3 nights in a row, just past midnight, she heard cries. At first, she brushed it off. A wounded animal maybe. Or a trick of the wind. But on the 4th night, the sound grew sharper, unmistakably human. It was a voice, faint and desperate. A woman's voice, echoing through the trees. She paused her knitting, turned down the radio, and listened again. A long, trembling cry floated through the open window, carried by the wind like a ghost. Winston raised his head and gave a low whine. Mrs. Langford's hand tightened around her shawl. "That's no animal," she whispered. She considered going out, grabbing her flashlight and trekking through the woods, but she was old, and the forest was dense and dangerous. Still, the sound haunted her. Something was wrong. She just didn't know what. Miles away, Daniel sat alone in his rental car parked outside a grimy gas station, stacks of paperwork spread across the dashboard. He'd been chasing cold trails for weeks, hotel receipts, bank statements, credit card logs. Most of it led nowhere. Nathan had covered his tracks well. But then he found it, a charge made on Nathan's card for an old, backwoods fuel station just on the edge of Blackwood Forest. The same area where, years ago, Daniel and Emily had hiked as kids. It wasn't on the way to any business meeting. It wasn't near any client's office or property. And the date of the purchase? The same night Emily disappeared. Daniel's pulse quickened. He walked into the station and showed the clerk a photo of Nathan. The man squinted. "Yeah, I seen him. Big black SUV. Came through late, stormy night. Didn't say much. He looked nervous. Had a woman in the passenger seat. She looked asleep." Daniel's chest tightened. "Asleep. Could have been passed out," the man said with a shrug. "Didn't move none." Daniel stepped outside, gripping the photo. Trees loomed in the distance. Blackwood Forest. Thousands of acres of untamed wilderness, steep cliffs, old hiking paths, and abandoned mining caves. Daniel remembered exploring some of them with Emily when they were kids. There were places in there where no one went anymore. If Nathan wanted to hide something, or someone, that forest would be perfect. For the first time in weeks, Daniel had something that felt real. A direction. A place to start. He got back into the car and opened his map app, eyes tracing the nearest backroads into the forest. He had no idea what he would find. But in his gut, he knew. Emily was out there. Somewhere in the trees, somewhere near those caves, someone was crying in the dark, and Daniel wasn't going to stop until he found her. Daniel stormed into the sheriff's office the next morning, eyes bloodshot, hair unkempt, and fists clenched around a folder packed with everything he had. The fuel receipt, the gas station clerk's statement, and maps of the Blackwood Forest. Sheriff Cole Jennings, a man more concerned with politics than justice, looked up from his desk with a frown that bordered on irritation. "I need you to reopen Emily's case," Daniel said, slapping the folder down. "I've got proof Nathan was near the forest the night she disappeared. This isn't some conspiracy theory. Something happened out there." Jennings barely looked at the papers. "Daniel, we followed protocol. Nathan cooperated. No signs of foul play. And Emily, well, she had a history of anxiety, didn't she? Stress can make people do unpredictable things." Daniel's voice rose. "She was 8 months pregnant. You think she wandered into the woods on her own? You think she vanished with no money, no phone, no ID, just because she was stressed?" Jennings sighed. Nathan's a respected man around here. He donates to the department every year. Has influence with the mayor. I can't just act without. I don't care about his money, Daniel cut in. I care about my sister. And if you won't help me, I'll do it myself. And he did. For the next several days, Daniel retraced every known move Nathan had made. He drove to the hotel Nathan was rumored to have visited and posed as a tech rep to gain access to lobby security footage. It was grainy, but he saw him, Nathan, entering with a woman who was definitely not Emily. Olivia Hart. He questioned gas station employees, rangers, hikers, even old hikers forums online. His obsession grew sharper, his notes longer. He hardly slept. Finally, desperate and unwilling to wait any longer, he broke into Nathan's home office one night using a spare key he had swiped from an old security guard at the estate. Inside, the air smelled like expensive leather and ink. But what caught his eye was a hidden drawer in the desk, one that contained a separate phone. Not Nathan's public one. He powered it on. There were texts. Voice memos. One message chilled him. She won't survive out there for long. Just keep your story straight. It was Olivia's voice. Daniel's jaw tightened. It was time to expose them, no matter what it took. Daniel moved through the dense underbrush of Blackwood Forest, boots sinking into soft earth, his flashlight slicing through the shadows. The trees towered above him, branches clawing at the sky like twisted fingers. The further he hiked, the more suffocating the silence became. Only the occasional rustle of leaves or snap of a twig reminded him he wasn't alone in the world. Sweat clung to his back despite the evening chill, and exhaustion gnawed at his legs, but he pressed on. He had scoured several caves already, all empty, cold, lifeless. But something drove him forward. Instinct. Desperation. The unshakable bond between siblings. As he paused at the edge of a narrow ravine, catching his breath, a sound drifted through the trees. So faint he almost thought he imagined it. A cry. Not an animal. Not the wind. A human voice, soft, broken, echoing through the trees like a whisper from the dead. He froze. The sobs were muffled, intermittent. Like someone trying to call for help with their last ounce of strength. He turned off the flashlight, closed his eyes, and listened. There. To the west. Just beyond the moss-covered ridge. Daniel scrambled down the slope, branches clawing at his arms. Thorns tore at his clothes, and he nearly slipped on wet stone, but he didn't care. He followed the sound, heart pounding, lungs burning, until he came to a wall of brush, thick, knotted vines and branches concealing something behind it. He pushed through it with his bare hands, and there it was. A cave, small, jagged, hidden from sight. Completely out of view unless you knew exactly where to look. His breath caught as he stepped inside. The air was damp, cold, and smelled of mold and decay. Then he saw her. Emily. She lay slumped against the stone wall, her skin pale and slick with sweat, her lips cracked, her eyes sunken and wild. She clutched her belly with both arms, whispering something under her breath. A lullaby? A prayer? Emily, Daniel choked, rushing forward, falling to his knees beside her. Her eyes widened. She blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Then she sobbed. Daniel, you found me. He wrapped his arms around her gently, holding her as she cried into his shoulder. I've got you, he whispered. You're safe now. I promise. I'm taking you home. Daniel carried Emily in his arms, her body frighteningly light, her breath shallow against his chest. Every step out of the forest felt like a battle against time. The terrain was rough, but he didn't stop. Not once. He whispered to her the entire way, telling her to hold on, that he was there, that everything would be okay. Her head rested against his shoulder, murmuring weakly in response, slipping in and out of consciousness. By the time they reached the roadside where he'd parked his car, his arms were numb, but he didn't hesitate. He laid her gently in the back seat, wrapped her in his jacket, and sped toward the nearest hospital, his fingers white on the steering wheel. At the emergency entrance, nurses rushed out as soon as they saw him carrying her in. Alarms were triggered. Doctors crowded around. Severely dehydrated, signs of trauma, fetal distress. The words bounced around Daniel like a whirlwind. He could only watch as they wheeled her away. Hours passed. Daniel sat in the waiting room, fists clenched, unable to sit still. Finally, a doctor approached, his expression serious, but not grim. "She's stable," he said. "We had to deliver the baby early, but both mother and child are alive." Daniel exhaled, tears burning his eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. Emily lay in the hospital bed later that night, eyes fluttering open. In her arms rested a tiny, fragile newborn wrapped in soft pink. She looked at Daniel and whispered, "Her name is Hope." He nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. Perfect. The hospital's report, filed within 24 hours, detailed extensive signs of abuse and neglect. Bruises, malnutrition, drug traces. It was more than enough to open a criminal investigation. Nathan Blackwood wouldn't be able to silence this. Not anymore. Dr. Helen Reeves, the hospital's chief of trauma care, stood at the foot of Emily's bed with a thick folder in hand. Her voice was calm, but the words were damning. She outlined a precise timeline of Emily's physical condition, the bruising on her wrists consistent with restraint, extreme dehydration, early signs of starvation, and the presence of a powerful sedative in her system. All of it documented, photographed, and now part of a formal medical report. "There's no doubt," Dr. Reeves said. "She was held against her will for a prolonged period. This wasn't abandonment. It was entrapment." Daniel took the report and left the hospital with renewed fire in his chest. He wasn't stopping. Not until Nathan paid for everything. Over the next few days, Daniel pieced together a trail of evidence that had once seemed unreachable. He hacked into Nathan's travelogues through a private investigator friend and tracked every hotel stay, including the luxury suite Nathan shared with Olivia Hart. Photos, receipts, private driver records, they all painted the same picture. And worse, Nathan's company card had been used to pay for certain expenses the night Emily went missing. Then came the break. Olivia Hart, sensing that the walls were closing in, tried to disappear. But in her rush, she left behind a burner phone in the penthouse she had abandoned. Daniel retrieved it with help from a contact at the local paper. On that phone were voice recordings, long, damning ones. Nathan's voice. "She won't survive out there for long. Just keep your story straight." Olivia's reply. "You said this would be clean. Now she's alive, and if she talks, we both go down." Daniel stared at the screen, every nerve in his body screaming with rage. It was time to go public. The headlines spread like wildfire: "Millionaire husband arrested for imprisoning pregnant wife." News vans camped outside the Blackwood estate. Talk shows dissected every detail. Photos of Emily, frail but holding her newborn in the hospital, flooded the internet. The story gripped the nation: the betrayal, the survival, the scandal. Nathan Blackwood was arrested at his office in full view of employees and reporters. He wore his signature tailored suit and forced a calm expression, but the flash of cameras captured the tremble in his jaw. He offered no statement. His lawyer did all the talking, calling it a tragic misunderstanding. But no one was buying it anymore. Olivia Hart, found 2 towns over in a motel under a fake name, was taken into custody 3 days later. Faced with mounting evidence, she folded quickly. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she testified in full about the affair, the sedatives, the cave. Her testimony was cold, precise, and devastating. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. The courtroom was packed during the trial. Emily sat on the witness stand in a navy blue dress, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of her seat. But her voice, though fragile, carried strength the moment she began. "I thought he loved me," she said, eyes locked on Nathan. "I trusted him with my life, and with the life growing inside me. But when I became inconvenient, he locked me away like I was nothing." Gasps echoed across the room. Sheriff Jennings took the stand as well. Under oath, he admitted what many suspected: he had been afraid. afraid of challenging Nathan's power, afraid of what it might cost him politically. His voice trembled with shame. "I failed her," he said. "I failed Emily." Daniel watched from the front row, fists tight, jaw clenched, but heart swelling with pride as his sister stood tall against the man who tried to erase her. The jury didn't need long. Nathan Blackwood was found guilty of attempted manslaughter, unlawful imprisonment, and conspiracy. The judge called it one of the most egregious abuses of wealth and power the court had ever seen. Emily left the courthouse with her head held high. Her voice had been stolen, but now she had taken it back. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as the judge delivered the final sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nathan Blackwood didn't flinch. His expression was blank, almost hollow, the same face he had worn the day Emily last saw him in that cave. But this time, the chains were on him. The gavel fell. Justice was served. Emily sat still for a moment, letting the weight of those words settle into her bones. She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, little Hope, whose tiny chest rose and fell with peace Emily had fought so hard for. Beside her, Daniel exhaled slowly and stood, gently guiding his sister to her feet. Together, they walked out of the courtroom and into the blinding sunlight, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Emily didn't speak that day. She didn't need to. Weeks later, they quietly relocated to a new city, away from the stairs and the headlines. It was a modest home, nothing like the mansion she once lived in, but it was filled with laughter, healing, and safety. Hope grew stronger every day, her cries giving way to sweet giggles. Daniel lived a few streets over, always near, always ready. Emily began to find her voice again, not just for herself, but for others. She started small, speaking at local women's shelters, then at university events, and eventually on national platforms. Her message was clear and powerful: abuse doesn't always leave bruises you can see, but it always leaves scars that matter. Her courage inspired countless others to step forward, to seek help, to break free. Daniel, always the quiet protector, began writing. His book, Buried But Not Broken, chronicled their journey. From the moment he felt something was wrong, to the night he followed whispers in the woods, to the fight for justice in a courtroom built to favor men like Nathan. The book became a bestseller, praised for its raw honesty and unwavering love between siblings. As the months passed, their lives slowly rebuilt. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. And every night, as Emily rocked baby Hope to sleep, she would whisper softly, "We were never broken, just buried. And now, we've bloomed." The morning sun bathed the park in gold, its warmth wrapping gently around the quiet hum of families enjoying their Sunday. Laughter echoed from children running along the path, birds chirped overhead, and somewhere nearby, a musician played soft acoustic guitar. Emily stood near a bench, barefoot on the grass, arms slightly extended as baby Hope wobbled on tiny legs in front of her. "One step, sweet girl, you've got this," Emily whispered, heart pounding with joy. Hope giggled, then took one step. Another. A shaky pause. And then a third. Daniel, a few feet away, held his phone steady, capturing every second. His voice cracked with excitement. "She's doing it, Em. She's walking." Emily dropped to her knees just in time to catch Hope as she stumbled forward. They both laughed, the sound echoing through the trees. In that moment, it felt like time stopped. All the pain, all the darkness, all the fear, dissolved into this single slice of happiness. Nearby, a small news crew from a national women's network watched from a respectful distance. They had arranged the interview weeks ago, after the trial made headlines across the country. But they hadn't expected this, to see Emily not just surviving, but living. Smiling. Whole. Later that afternoon, Emily sat beneath a blossoming cherry tree, microphone clipped to her blouse, Hope resting peacefully in her lap. Her voice was steady now, stronger than ever, her words clear as she answered each question with quiet grace. "I never imagined my life would take the turns it did," she said. "1 year ago, I was chained in a cave. Now, I'm here, alive, safe, holding my daughter and surrounded by love." The reporter nodded, clearly moved. "And what would you say, if you could speak to women who feel voiceless right now. Emily looked down at Hope, then at Daniel standing just beyond the camera, smiling through glassy eyes. She turned back to the lens, her expression unwavering. I would tell them this. He tried to bury me in silence, but my brother gave me back my voice. The reporter swallowed hard. The cameraman paused for a beat longer than usual. Behind them, Daniel turned away slightly, wiping at his eyes. As the sun dipped lower into the horizon, casting a soft glow across the park, Emily stood and lifted Hope into her arms. Daniel joined her, and together they walked toward the car, ready to go home. It wasn't the life she once imagined. It was better. Because it was hers, and no one would ever take it away again.